Well, it's a real pleasure to be talking today to another alumni in this series of conversations. Today I'm talking with Bob Hoyt, who is the former General Counsel of Barclays and will soon be moving to HSBC as their Chief Legal Officer. So a real pleasure to be talking to you today, Bob.
Oh, thank you, Alex, and thank you for having me. It's terrific to be back in Ithaca, even if it's only virtually.
And this is one of our more distant conversations because I believe you're over in London currently.
That's right. I'm in sunny London. It actually is sunny today, somewhat sunny anyway.
Well, that's nice to hear because it's actually sunny in Ithaca, but though oftentimes England and Ithaca share one thing in common, which is nice cloudy weather and a little bit of rain. But good to hear it's sunny today. So we've been having a series of these conversations with our alumni, trying to understand the impact of COVID-19 on the different industries they work in. And I was particularly interested in hearing your perspective as an alum who's working, leading the legal side of a major international organization. We've talked a lot of our alumni about the experience in their industries in the United States. But one of the real things about COVID-19 is that this has been a global pandemic, something that's affecting the whole world at once. And so really unusual event in that way. So I was very interested to hear what your experience has been and how COVID-19 has affected your industry and the organization you've worked with.
Yeah, thank you. It's a great question, and given that the industry is sort of the global financial services industry, it's actually a pretty complex question of how organizations like ours have been affected by the virus. And I guess one difference from some other industries, I think, is that the banking industry has been called upon to be really a very critical component of the government's response. And that's really true of governments around the globe. So in many ways, we are considered to be one of the essential businesses that have needed to remain operational to support the economy. And not just needing to remain operational, but actually to, in some ways, enhance our operations. A lot of what we have done, which has been critical to continue as the economy has felt impacts of this virus, has been to provide financing solutions to businesses, large and small, to be able to continue to service retail customers. And that means keeping a lot of our operations up and running. And as I said before, some of these operations have actually seen unprecedented volume. So it's not just to keep them going, but actually to expand them at a time when, our colleagues are, dealing with the same issues that everyone else is around the world. Concerns about their own health, concerns about their families' health, technological challenges, and so on. And just to give some examples, some of what we've done, and there are many banks in this position in the U.S. and the UK and in other countries. Helping the governments devise and roll out loan programs and other financing programs where the banks would be the vehicle for getting critical financial relief to businesses and individuals, whether that's furlough payments, emergency loans, et cetera. And you'll be familiar with some of the programs in the US, and there are many analogous programs like that here in the United Kingdom. To give you a sense of the magnitude of that, we've made, in a course of weeks, more business loans than we would normally make in years, right? And so it's just taking that volume and just sort of massively increasing it. If you think about our call centers, which handle inquiries from customers, retail customers, people having questions about their loans or wanting to get relief, maybe a holiday from paying their loans, et cetera. Those call centers have just experienced unprecedented volume. We've needed to keep our branches open because, many customers need to go into branches for critical financial services. And so, all of that activity has been going on as a bit of a backdrop to what I would say are the normal impacts of dealing with the environment. So we've had, lots of, we've had the combination of things that I think other businesses have seen. We've taken probably at Barclays roughly 80,000 people and converted them to work from home in a matter of a week to 10 days. I mean, that was an extraordinary conversion, and one that if you'd probably asked most of us a year ago, was it even possible, we would say it's probably not. So that kind of conversion was pretty critical. But then also putting in place the program so that we could have colleagues coming into branches, coming into call centers, coming into some of the other operations of the bank where it was more essential or critical for the people to be on premise to do what they normally do. And allowing them to do that in a way that they feel comfortable with, that's safe for them, that's safe for our customers. So really quite a heroic lift by the people out there making all of that work and come together.
It strikes me it must be particularly challenging in the financial industry, given that one of the core things that we rely on is the security of our money, in essence. Yeah. And if everybody's working remotely and dispersed, you don't have that kind of security that you feel when you go into the bank and you know that there's that kind of security in place there.
Yeah, it's a great point, and it's one that we think about a lot. And I think the fact is that there have been trade-offs that have had to be made. Having people dispersed where you can't have some of the ordinary compliance routines and oversight to make sure that their security is very critical. Having people work from, their home Wi-Fi networks and so on, poses risks. One of the points that you have in mind, people are in such different situations, right? You might have a young person who works at the bank who is sharing an apartment or a flat with 2 or 3 other people who also work for other banks. Right. And they're all sitting at the same dining room table trying to do their job, right? Yeah. That's not something you encounter ordinarily. And then you have the other factor, which is, has been for a while in our society a very big factor, but is especially a risk now, is the risk of cybercrime. And that's a risk posed to our customers, where there are, it's shocking to think about it, but in a tragic circumstances like this, unfortunately, crooks and, con artists and so on do come out and they try to take advantage of it and take advantage of customers, especially customers who are more vulnerable. So we've had to really step up our defenses against that. So there have been some trade-offs, but I think on the whole, touch wood, we feel like we've been able to balance that in the right way to get the right level of service and the right level of safety.
Yeah, the point about the cybercrime is interesting. We've certainly seen here in the U.S. some of the unemployment fraud attempts. I even ran into myself. There was apparently somebody attempted to file an unemployment claim using my name in New York State. Obviously I'm currently employed as dean, so that was flagged right away. But it does suggest that there is this complexity in administering all these programs that are going on. Operating an international financial institution, assuming that must be even more complex because of the differences across countries and in programs, you have to be able to operate with each of these different governments effectively.
I guess I would say that one of the particular complexities of being an organization that operates across different countries is that there's a different situation in every country. I mean, similar in the United States, there's a different situation in different regions or even state by state. And it might be what the levels of infection are. It might be the laws that are in place in those different areas. And also dealing with, the criminal activity across that is also quite a challenge. What a lot of cyber criminals do is they're constantly looking and probing for weaknesses in your system. And when you think about what a radical change to the system it has been to have people going from gathering together in a building where you had quite a bit of, sophisticated security wrapped around it, to all of a sudden having everybody dispersed, working from home, working through common platforms, that might not be proprietary to the bank, it opens up quite a bit of risk. So the people who defend against that kind of criminal activity, they've really, they've been working double time, and I think will be throughout this pandemic.
Yeah, one of the groups that's been real heroes of the kind of dealing with this situation has been all these skilled tech people who've allowed us to continue to work in these remote fashions. I think it's been a great reminder of the value of those people. You'd mentioned earlier that you have about 80,000 people that you had to move out to remote work and adapt to this situation where we can't work in the normal fashion. Multiple people, working in their apartment together. What steps did you take for your organization to try and help navigate through that process and help people deal with all these challenges we have of remote working and working under the pandemic conditions?
Yeah, it was a few things. I mean, you first off, as we were just discussing, you have the technology aspect of it. The good news is that a lot of people, for some of what they do generally, are already set up on some sort of a remote technology, having a laptop or an iPad or an iPhone or something that would enable them to work from home. But then you have others where their job had never been done from home. And so it was everything from shipping out equipment. We had bumps in the road at the start, as you might imagine, but I think we quickly got to a spot where we listened to people. We tried to understand, what were the impediments, that they had to getting their work done so that we could fill those gaps, working with our partners in technology and our vendors, et cetera. Another big factor was frankly to be concerned, and this is really the biggest factor, is the concerns about the health of our colleagues. And of course, first and foremost, it's people whose health is threatened by the virus itself, and making sure we had good reporting so that we knew who had been affected. If they were in a work site, obviously taking the precautions that you would want to take for other employees that might have been exposed, but also looking after people who were at home and had been impacted and tracking that and following up with them. Another really big factor that we had some early warnings on because of offices in Asia, which had dealt with this in the past and dealt with this earlier on, but is being attentive to workers' mental health. And it's something that I think is easy not to spot, but we had quite a bit of warning from people in our offices in the Asia Pacific region that this was something that was important to be attentive to. And so quite a bit of checking in with people, having talks that were generally available to managers and others by psychologists and psychiatrists, talking about some of the impacts, providing people with tools to deal with some of the challenges of working at home, training and other modules. How do you shut off at night and not just keep working all the time? How do you take breaks? How do you deal with the fact that you might be trying to get your work done when your children are home because the schools are closed, or where you're caring for an elderly person who's vulnerable, or where maybe you or someone in your household is vulnerable, so it limits your ability to go out. Really being very attentive and helping people through that. And the final element of it was communication. A lot of the advice we got early on, and it was great advice, and I'm so grateful to have listened to it early on, was how important communication was. Just staying in touch with people, checking in, letting them know what was going on. Even if you didn't know a lot of information, telling them what you did know so that they could feel informed, connected, and so that you could be checking in on people and look for those early signs that someone is feeling stress or is, having some challenges dealing with the situation.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So it's really a comprehensive approach that you bring in a range of different responses there: the communication, the mental health, the equipment, all of those things operating together essentially.
That's right. That's right. And as you would, to me, this is one of the good things that comes out of this situation. Is you and I have, when we've spoken, and I'm sure we all do every day. Quite often you start off one of these Zoom calls or conversations just asking people how they are, where they are, how are they doing, how are they coping with it, is everybody okay? And that's actually a nice, it's sort of a nice return to a personal connection with people we work with, where, just in the fast pace of everything, you might not have thought to ask those questions before. And we learn a little bit more about one another and our circumstances, and that's nice. I hope that lasts.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are some of these lessons that, some things that we always knew, but I think there are some lessons here that we can take forward in organizations going forward. What things do you see as things that are likely to continue on as changes in the future, or things that will kind of go back to normal? I mean, it's interesting seeing some of now the progress with the vaccine research. Hopefully,
Yeah.
We're starting to see the end of the tunnel coming. But what changes might we see sticking with us in the future?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we talk about it quite a bit. And we've had now for a few months, we've had a working task force at the bank trying to think through all of those issues. What are the implications for how we will work as an organization in the future? And of course, we think about it as a legal function, and different parts of the bank, will have different perspectives on it. My own opinion, it's just my opinion. I think that some of what you read is a little bit exaggerated in terms of how fundamentally and dramatically this will change the way we work in the future. My view is that there will be some lasting, very significant positive impacts, but I'm not sure they're going to be as extreme as abandoning high-rise office buildings and everybody now works from home and nobody ever comes to the office together. I don't see that most large organizations will go fully remote, and I don't think the age of the office tower is over. On the other hand, though, I do think that there have been some real positives that have come out of this, and they will stick with us, because I think for some of this, there's no turning back. And one example is just the way we all look at remote working or dynamic working, whatever you might call it. My impression, this of course varies organization to organization, but my impression before the COVID crisis began was that, in my organization and many others, we had remote dynamic working available. People would take advantage of that, and people accepted it in principle. But there was quite a bit of variance in terms of how genuinely open people were to it. They might be, that's fine, but I can't do that, or I can't do that with my job. Or for some people, they might say, I don't want my people doing that. I think those views have changed. Wherever you were on that spectrum, I think you have a different appreciation today of what is possible and what the trade-offs are of working remotely versus how effectively one can work. And I think across the board, it's led everybody to be more open to those arrangements than they might have been in the past. I think that ranges from the most curmudgeonly person who had no interest in it at all to people who actually were pretty open to it. I think everyone has shifted over to realize, wow, this really can be done and can be done effectively. Maybe not for everyone, maybe not every day, maybe not for every position, but quite broadly. And I think that's going to stick with us. And I think that will have, I suspect and I hope professors at the ILR school will be studying this. This will have, I think, significant impacts on the workforce. It will increase diversity. It will open up the workforce to people who had self-selected out for various reasons related to their location, whether they needed to be at home or near home to, be a caregiver to somebody, or whether they just weren't able one way or another to be commuting to the place where they normally had to go to for work. So it makes a new workforce or broader workforce available to companies. It will probably enable people to stay working with companies longer than they might otherwise have, maybe do 2 or 3 or 5 years more than they would have, knowing that they can do things more remotely and not have to be in the office every day. So I think that optionality that it opens up, that's going to be a really significant and positive improvement that we'll all benefit from. As I said, I don't think that's going to be reversible. So I think that's the biggest impact. Another one that I alluded to before is that I think it has had the impact, I hope this lasts, of bringing leaders closer to their teams. I think we have gained a little bit more of an appreciation of the circumstances our colleagues are working under and living under, and how that impacts the way they do work. And it's led us all to be, I think, more empathetic, and it'll lead us to be better, more thoughtful managers, because we'll realize that people are in very different situations. It makes a big difference whether you have young children at home with the schools closed versus if you don't, whether you have roommates versus if you don't, whether you're a caregiver for somebody or whether you're vulnerable, et cetera. So I just think our heightened awareness of that and taking that into account, it will create a bit more thoughtful, empathetic bond between people who work together as a group, whether it's manager and direct report, or even just colleagues across the group. And that'll be a good positive change.
Yeah, I think we're all getting a little more empathetic about that. I was just thinking the other night, my wife and I were watching CNN, and the Secretary of State for Pennsylvania was on TV, and suddenly his teenage son walks in the back of the screen on his smartphone on national TV, which I think we've all been experiencing moments like that.
Yeah, we had a lovely. I was doing a large, like a town hall type of meeting with my managers across the global footprint. And we had as our guest speaker, our CEO, who was at home. And, he was evidently at home because he looked like you and me, not in an office, but, someplace with, home study, behind them and so on. And he was in his dining room in the middle of talking to us. The doorbell rang, and he had to run off and get the doorbell because it was a delivery. And it was this fabulous moment because and he just sort of laughed. He said, "There's the doorbell," and it was his neighbor bringing him some food because his wife was away and so on. And everyone on my team loved it because it was just this leveling experience, right? Of saying he's just like us. He's the CEO, but his Zoom call gets interrupted because someone's at the door and no one's home to get it, and he has to do it. So there's just a lot of these. It humanizes us all a little bit more, and it's nice to have that injected into our working life, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other one that I've noticed, we travel a fair bit in the academic world, and I'm sure in an international organization like you're traveling a lot, but we're certainly experiencing that now. We're missing the travel, but also realizing how much we can connect using the technology. And this has been a great example today, that we've been able to connect across the Atlantic, and reminded that we can keep doing that.
Yeah, that's right. And to me, that goes to the question about what will some of the lasting effects be. A lot of people have, predicted the demise of business travel. I'm not quite there. I like traveling. I like seeing people face to face. I do it quite a bit. And I think there's no substitute for that, for building relationships and getting to know people. But on the other hand, I think what this shows us, it just is you said, what otherwise might have been a phone call or an email exchange, or maybe we wouldn't even have thought to be trying to get together because we just wait until we were in the same city, and how long would that take to happen? This really does open up another avenue of communication. It's better than talking by phone. It's better than not talking at all, and I think it will become a new component of all of our lives. I think the video conference, the video chat will not go away. In my mind, I think it's going to supplement all the other ways in which we relate to one another, as opposed to replacing them. But we'll see. I might be wrong on that.
Yeah. Well, that's a nice message to finish up on. Maybe in this socially distanced time, we'll actually be able to be breaking down the distances a little more, taking advantage of all these technologies and opportunities. So real pleasure talking to you today, Bob. Thanks for all the insights, and great seeing you.
Well, thank you, Alex. Thank you for having me. Great to see you. And whatever we can do by Zoom, I do hope to be up there in Ithaca sometime very soon.
Well, that would be great to have you back on campus. Looking forward.
Fabulous. Thank you.
Thank you.